Hello there! Thank you for clicking on this video. So the previews for Aetherdrift has finally finished. All the cards have been spoiled, and so I wanted to make a final video looking at the remaining cards that I haven't gone over yet. I'm not going to go through all the cards. There's a lot of commons and uncommons that are mainly just for limited or just generally bad cards. So I'm just going to go over cards that I think are either interesting or may have some sort of use in Constructed. I just wanted to make a note here saying that I didn't get much sleep last night, so I'm very tired while recording this. So this might be another rough video, but if you stick with me, we can get through it together and yeah, we'll have some fun. Anyways, so starting off with the final Gear Hulk, Coal Stroke. Nope, that is not right. Coal Stoke Gear Hulk, 5 mana, 1, 2 black, 2 red for a 5/4 artifact creature construct. It has Menace and Death Touch, and when this creature enters, put target creature card with mana value 4 or less from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control with a finality counter on it. That creature gains Menace, Death Touch, and Haste. At the beginning of your next end step, exile that creature. So, obviously in Rakdos colors, it's going to be good in a sacrifice build, but just remember you have to put a finality counter on it and exile that creature at the end. So even if you have a way to sacrifice it at the end of the turn, since it has a finality counter on it, it will end up getting exiled. So you don't really want to reanimate something like Shieldred, which gets value from actually staying on the battlefield. You want something that gets value either on ETB or when it attacks. Overall, I think this is a good card. 5 mana, like I said, might be a lot, but I think you'll see play. Next, we have Howl Squad Heavy. It's a 3 mana 2/3 Goblin Mercenary. It has Start Your Engines, and other goblins you control have haste. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. That token attacks this combat if able. And then if you have max speed, it gains the ability to tap, add red for each goblin you control. So goblins are seeing a lot of support from this set. This creature kind of reminds me of Squee, except this creature itself doesn't have haste, but it doesn't have to attack in to create a goblin. It just creates a goblin and gives it haste, as well as any other goblins you play from there on gains haste. And I feel like it wouldn't be too difficult to get max speed with goblins. You could probably activate its max speed ability fairly often, especially since this is not a legendary creature. If you have 2 of these on the battlefield, they give each other haste. The question is, once you have a bunch of goblins on the battlefield and you tap for a bunch of red, what are you using the mana for? I guess you can use it to activate exhaust abilities or any other abilities, as well as just play out your entire hand. But typically by turn 3 or 4, if you're playing a goblin deck, you're top decking anyway, so unless you have ways to draw a bunch of cards, yeah, I don't know. I think this is a good card. I think goblins might be a thing after this set comes out. We'll see. Next up, we have Grim Bauble, an artifact that costs 1 black, and it says when this artifact enters, target creature an opponent control gets -2/-2 until end of turn. And then for 3, 2 and a black and tap, sacrifice this artifact, survey 2. This might be a good card for any sort of artifact synergy deck that also plays around with the graveyard. Though maybe 3 mana to survey 2 is a little bit too expensive. But that 1 mana to give a creature -2/-2 could be good against mono red or any of those aggressive decks. It's kind of like a cut down, I guess. You can play this and cut down to ensure that you have a turn 1 removal. But then again, it's not doing a whole lot if you're not going up against an aggressive deck. I guess you don't have to remove a creature. You can just play this to have an artifact on your battlefield to eventually use the survey 2 portion of it. But like I said, 3 mana might be a lot to survey 2. Next, we have Alacrian Armory. It's a 4 mana artifact, 3 and a white. It says creatures you control get +0/+1 and have vigilance. And then at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to one target mount or vehicle you control. Until end of turn, that permanent becomes saddled if it's a mount and becomes an artifact creature if it's a vehicle. So it's a 4 mana artifact to either saddle a mount or crew a vehicle. This might be nice if you are running either a mount deck or a vehicle deck and you're not running a whole lot of creatures to actually saddle or mount them. Plus, giving your creatures vigilance is pretty good. 4 mana is a lot, but I don't know. If vehicles or mounts become a thing, this might be an alright card. But overall, I don't think this card is going to see a lot of play, but it might have its place in certain decks. Next, we have Light Wheel Enchantments. It's an enchantment aura for 1 white, and it says enchant creature or vehicle. It also has start your engines, and enchanted permanent gets +1/+1 and has vigilance, and if you have max speed, you may cast this card from your graveyard. So giving one of your permanents vigilance and +1/+1 for just 1 mana, it's not too bad. Plus, if your creature gets removed, if you can achieve max speed, you can play this from your graveyard, so it has recursion. This might not be a bad addition to the Boros enchantment deck. Next up, we have Push the Limit. It's a 7 mana, 5 and 2 red for a sorcery that says return all mount and vehicle cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. Vehicles you control become artifact creatures until end of turn. Creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. So if you're playing a vehicle and mount deck, this might not be a bad card. 7 mana is a lot, but I mean, it's a pretty powerful effect. Yeah, this is definitely like the top end of your deck, and you play this to win the game. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people trying it out. This is definitely a build around, but I could see its potential. Next up, we have Kickoff Celebrations. It's a 2 mana enchantment with start your engines, and when this enchantment enters, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. Then when you have max speed, sacrifice this enchantment. Creatures and vehicles you control gain haste until end of turn. So this is a lot like Bitter Reunion. The only difference is with Bitter Reunion, you have to pay 1 mana to give all your creatures haste, while this one, you don't have to pay mana, you just have to have max speed. So I think this will see probably just as much play as Bitter Reunion sees play, so not a whole lot. Next we have Pothole Mole. It's a 3 mana, 2 and a green, 2/3 mole. When this creature enters, mill 3 cards. Then you may return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. It's not that great of a creature, but I can see it having some play in some constructed decks where you want to mill cards, fill up your graveyard, but also hit your land drops. And the great thing about this is you return a land from the graveyard. It doesn't have to be one of the cards that you milled. Maybe you'll see some play, but overall, not a very good card. Next, we have Locust Spray. It's a 1 mana instant. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, and then has cycling 1. Overall, I don't think this is that great of a card. Instant speed -1/-1 isn't nothing, but typically it's not enough to remove a creature. But the fact that it has cycling for 1 mana, maybe it'll see play, I don't know. Next up we have Gallant Strike. It's a 2 mana instant, 1 and a white. Destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater, and it has cycling 2. It is a okay removal spell, but any card that has like a potential that also has cycling is worth looking at, I think, because if you have a hand full of removal against a control deck that's not playing any creatures, you're kind of stuck with it. But if it has cycling, you could at least cycle it for a new card that hopefully will be useful. So if you're playing any sort of white deck and you're looking for instant speed removal, this is something to keep in mind. Next, we have Scrounging Skyray. It is a 2 mana, 1 in a blue, 1/2 fish pirate, and it has flying. And whenever you discard 1 or more cards, put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature, and it has cycling for 2. It seems like pirates from this set have a discard theme to it. And so you're probably going to fill the deck up with cards that have cycling or any sort of other discard effect, which you can play this on turn 2, and by turn 3 or 4, this could be a pretty large flying creature. So if you're looking to build a Pirates deck, I think this card is worth keeping in mind. Next up, we're getting Spell Pierce back. It's a 1 mana instant, blue, counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. Yeah, Spell Pierce has always been a staple in any sort of like fast meta. If you're on the play, you can play an island turn 1 and counter your opponent's Storm Chaser talent or any other turn 1 play as long as it's not a creature. So having a 1 mana counter spell may not be a bad thing. Next we have Stall Out. It's a 2 mana sorcery. It says tap target creature or vehicle, then put 3 stun counters on it. Then it has cycling for 2. Again, any sort of removal spell that has cycling on it I think is worth looking at. Obviously this isn't removal, but it could definitely go into any sort of tempo deck, especially since now bouncing creatures and tapping down creatures are becoming a bit more of a thing instead of removing them, so this might be a card that sees play. Next we have Chitin Gravestalker. It's a 6 mana 5/4. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact and or creature card in your graveyard and has cycling for 2. So its cycling ability is a great way to enable itself by putting a creature in the graveyard. I believe there was like a Sultai graveyard synergy deck where a bunch of creatures and spells cost cheaper when you have creatures in the graveyard. So this is just like another addition to that deck. The 5/4 body, I guess, isn't as good as a lot of the other creatures. I think there was like 5/5 and 6/6 creatures that had the same effect, but this also costs less with artifacts. So I don't know if adding artifacts to the deck would make it any better, but if that Sultai deck was your thing, this is a creature to keep in mind. Next, we have Risky Shortcut. It's a 3 mana sorcery, 2 and a black. It says draw 2 cards. Each player loses 2 life. I don't think this is a good card. There's been other cards like this and it hasn't seen much play, but typically it's you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. But this card has changed it to each player loses 2 life. So I thought that was a interesting, I guess you could consider it a power creep. Draw 2 cards and maybe just do the final 2 damage to your opponent or something like that. Next we have Wreckage Wickerfolk. It's a 2 mana 1/3 scarecrow, 1 and a black. It has flying, and when this creature enters, Surveil 2. A 2 mana 1/3 flying creature isn't too bad. And then the Surveil 2 on entering, I think this fits into something like a Raise the Past type of deck. Might be a better way to fill up your graveyard than say Amalia or something like that. So it's a creature to consider when building your Raise the Past deck. Hold on, someone's at the door. Next, we have Burner Rocket. It's a 2 mana 3/1 vehicle. It has flash. When this vehicle enters, target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. And it has crew 1. So it has a really cheap crew cost, has flash. Essentially, it's a pump spell attached to a semi-body. I don't know if you consider vehicles bodies or not. It sort of is like a body. I don't know how well a vehicle fits into the whole mono red aggressive archetype. You typically want like a 1 mana pump spell, so a 2 mana pump spell is a bit expensive, but you get a vehicle out of it. I don't know, this might be worth testing out. Next, Lightning Strike. You know, I guess we're getting Lightning Strike back, even though it's still in standard. Next, we have Magmakin Artillerist. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it's a 3 mana, 2 and a red, 1/4 elemental pirate. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, this creature deals that much damage to each opponent. Then it has cycling for 2, 1 and a red. When you cycle this card, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. I thought maybe this might fit into some sort of like burn deck. There's a couple cards that make you discard your entire hand. So maybe you're playing this, discard your hand, deal like 3 or 4 damage to your opponent, as well as cycle this card and deal 1 damage. I don't know, obviously this was made to go into the Pirates deck, but I think there were better 3-drop Pirates than this. Anyway, I don't know if this card is good, but I thought it just might have some potential. Next we have Sky Crash, a 2 mana instant that says destroy target artifact, and it has cycling for 1, 1 red. I always love cards with cheap cycling costs and 2 mana destroy target artifact. So it's like 1/2 of a Braid. You can have this in hand, and maybe your opponent isn't playing a lot of artifacts. You can always just cycle this. Next up, we have Thunderhead Gunner. It's a 5 mana 4/5 with reach. It's a Shark Pirate, and discard a card, draw a card, activate only as a sorcery and only once each turn. Overall, a 5 mana 4/5 with reach is not that great of a creature, but a free discard ability I thought might be worth at least considering or taking a look at. Obviously, only being able to activate once a turn and as a sorcery is a downside. But my first initial thought was maybe you're playing some sort of like discard synergistic deck that also is playing Agatha's Soul Cauldron. You can get this ability to a bunch of creatures. I don't know. I just thought having a free discard ability is good. Next, we have Plow Through. It's a 1 mana sorcery. It says choose one. Target creature you control fights target creature an opponent controls or destroy target vehicle. This seems more like a sideboard card. If you're going up against an opponent that's playing a lot of vehicles, this is a great 1 mana removal. Though being sorcery speed is not that great, but it also gives you the choice to be a fight spell for 1 mana. Would have been better if it was instant, but still not bad as a sorcery. And then next we have Run Over, which is a 2 mana instant, and this spell costs 1 less to cast if it targets a mount or vehicle you control. Then target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. So this is like a better version of the last card, except it requires you to, well, it doesn't require you to, but it benefits off of you playing vehicles or mounts. Typically it costs 2 mana, so it's a 2 mana instant bite spell, but it can be 1 mana if you control a mount or vehicle and you have that creature fight your opponent's creature. Or not fight, but bite, I guess. So yeah, we're seeing a lot more removal spells for green, which is good. Next we have Silken Strength. It's a 2 mana enchantment aura. It has flash and enchant creature or vehicle. When this aura enters, untap enchanted permanent. Enchanted permanent gets +1/+2 and has reach. It's not the greatest enchantment spell, but any enchantment that untaps a creature is worth keeping an eye on. Plus it has flash, so could be a good addition to any sort of enchantment decks. Next we have Broadside Barrage. 3 mana, 1 a blue and a red for an instant. Says Broadside Barrage deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Draw a card, then discard a card. So it's a 3 mana remove a creature or planeswalker, as long as toughness is 5 or less. But you get to draw and discard, which is made to synergize well with the pirate cards from this set. As you can see, it's in the Izzet colors and has a bunch of pirates there. Yep. If pirates become a thing and the whole like discard thing ends up being a good mechanic, then I think this card might be a good addition as a removal in that deck. Next we have Gastel Thrillseeker. 2 mana, black and a red for a lizard berserker. Has start your engines, and when this creature enters, it deals 1 damage to target opponent and you gain 1 life. Then if you reach max speed, this creature has death touch and haste. So very interesting to think about is the whole speed mechanic. Might go really well in a lizards deck, because lizards, you know, you're always damaging opponent. You don't even have to attack in sometimes. You can just play lizards and damage your opponent that way. So maybe the fastest way to reach max speed is in a lizards deck. Also, this card by itself gets you to speed 2 on turn 2. And the last card I'll be talking about today is Guidelight Matrix. It's a 2 mana artifact that says when this artifact enters, draw a card. And then for 2 and a tap, target mount you control becomes saddled until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. And then for 2 and another tap, target vehicle you control becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. So this is a 2 mana artifact that for 2 mana you can either saddle a mount or crew a vehicle. I don't know if this is any good, but I thought it was very interesting. Could be good in a artifact matters type of deck, and a good way to crew vehicles or saddle mounts without actually playing like other creatures. Whether that's actually a good mechanic or not, I have no idea, but I will definitely be testing it out. So yep, and that concludes all the spoilers from this set. Like I said, obviously I didn't look at everything, but if there's some common or uncommon that I didn't talk about that I definitely should have talked about, leave a comment below, let me know. Anyway, if you stuck around this long, greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. And remember, have fun doing what you love, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.